Okay, this is the intro for the podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Silver Screen Fiends podcast. I am your host, Sam, and I'm joining you on this lovely Tuesday for a very, very impromptu, off-the-cuff episode about Vincent Price. And I'm joined by the professional gentleman and one of my dearest friends in the whole wide world, Phil. Phil, how are you today?
Well, considering this is my face reveal of the Gent character, I guess this is a good way to come out talking about one of our favorite boys in the world.
I totally didn't realize that. Wow, this is a first on the show, so you're seeing it here for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. So yeah, I was talking with Phil earlier today, and we decided that since tomorrow, well, actually today, by the time it premieres, is Vincent Price's 109th birthday, that we would do a very short tribute episode. And in the future, I anticipate on having a much more grandiose experience on display. But for now, I figured we would just gush over one of our favorite gentlemen in cinema. Yeah, so Phil, when did you first get introduced to Vincent Price?
Oh my goodness, I was little. I definitely remember probably one of the earliest things I saw of Vincent Price was there was this and we've watched it together before, this episode of The Muppet Show where Vincent Price is on, and
yes,
it's one of the funniest episodes, and I think it's from the first season actually, and it was one of their It was one of their first attempts at a themed episode. So they had a lot of horror-themed stuff going around. And, of course, Vincent Price is the eternal ham, as he is. So one of the best moments to come out of that show, which is a GIF you can find everywhere, is him presenting fake fangs, and then Kermit grows fangs and bites into his neck, and it's always funny.
Yeah, Kermit the Vamp. I remember the first time I saw that. It was just so fantastic. It just
and past that, I want to say that my other interactions with Price came from very small things. Probably one of them being Scooby-Doo, when he voiced Vincent Van Gogh in The 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, which obviously, since they're making the Hanna-Barbera cinematic universe now with Scoob, Vincent Van Gogh has to make a comeback, and what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to resurrect Vincent Price to replay the character.
Yeah, they're going to get into a little bit of legal trouble, but hey, you small price to pay to resurrect a corpse. But
I'm sure his daughter wouldn't mind at all.
No, I'm kidding. But I know that they did, I don't know if it was released, but they did a special where Vincent Van Gogh came back and Maurice LaMarche voiced Vincent Price's character, and I thought it was pretty decent. But
it was. Yeah. It was a good homage.
Yeah, I think it was a good job. But okay, yeah, I have sort of a similar story. My dad would show me a bunch of B horror growing up, and Vincent Price was somebody that he always idolized. Any film, and I agree with this, and I'm sure you do, there's not one film I can name that he's in, leading or cameo, that doesn't make an impression on me.
Oh yeah, whether or not it's a big role or a small role, he'll either chew the scenery, steal the scene, or both at the same time. And really, what can you ask for from basically one of the most perfect actors of that age?
Yeah. And most people would think that that's a great exaggeration. But I think ever since seeing him as a kid, like, I think the first movie my dad showed me with him was Last Man on Earth. And then it was Dr. Phibes. Are you laughing because of that scene?
You know exactly the scene I'm laughing at.
Okay, so I guess I was gonna save it, but we'll just talk about it now. So in Last Man on Earth, and for those that don't know, Last Man on Earth is sort of the second the first title in an unofficial trilogy, which starts with The Last Man on Earth, then The Omega Man in the 70s, and then technically I Am Legend with Will Smith. It's sort of like in the same universe, quote unquote. But
it's all based on the same book.
Right. So it's Vincent Price in that role, and he is the last man on Earth. And there's a scene, it's about halfway through the movie, and he finally discovers that there's actually another living soul. And he sees him in like a faraway park, and he's trying to like catch up to her. And it starts this like 1 minute scene of him running after her.
And it's like it's not even like running. He's like jaunting, just very daintily going, wait, stop.
Wait, stop. I have to talk to you. And actually,
Please don't run.
I was hoping we were going to get my good friend James on here because he also absolutely loves that scene. But if you want to hear us allude to that joke, it's in our Shaw Brothers episode. It's in the first 2 seconds of it, but it is fantastic. I love the movie as a whole, and that was one of my first movies by him. And then the abominable Dr. Phibes, which is, I dedicated an entire episode on it. It's episode 5 of this podcast, and it is one of my favorite horror movies ever. And it's like this. Mm-hmm.
I believe we talked about it just a tiny bit on Pro Gent Opera Glasses episode, where we were just talking about some of our favorite horror movies, and you mentioned Phibes on one of them.
Mm-hmm. We did, and it's great because it's this horror comedy art deco film that doesn't take itself seriously, but at the same time it actually kind of invokes this crazy amount of, not even gore, but you kind of get like this thrilling sense about it. And it ended up setting the template for films like the Saw series because of the way that Vincent Price's character kind of came up with these elaborate traps in order to get back for the death of his wife.
Yeah.
And it's just from then on, anything I ever saw him in, he easily became one of my favorite actors of all time. It doesn't matter what genre. And it's not just horror. He transcends it all. I mean...
Oh, yeah. If you look at some of his dramatic roles, they're so well taken into context with the pieces that he does. And when he does comedic roles, he's a riot. If he does something sort of down the line where it's sort of like a character in a novel, like probably the best example that I can think of, and it's such a bit role, is when he played Cardinal Richelieu in The Three Musketeers with Gene Kelly.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so it just goes without saying that everything he's in is just such a fucking treat. And I know he's had a background in theater too, which, most actors do, but it kind of goes to show you that he has that history and that long-standing acting prowess that he brings to every role. And I think he's absolutely perfect at playing the anti-hero. And that seems to be a majority of his roles. And a lot of them you would chalk up to being straight villainous or chaotic evil. But even in Dr. Phibes, where he's killing all these people, he wants this revenge because he feels as if everyone killed his wife on the operating table and there was nothing he could do about it. And he knows from a scientific background and a thespian background that there's something better that could have been done in order to take care of her. So you're like, oh, wow, you're kind of conflicted on how to feel about it.
Yeah, he does that role more than a handful of times, and every time he does it, you do feel that sympathy for that character.
Yeah.
Phibes is a great example of it. You got Theater Blood, which
Yes.
is one of my favorites. Which is for anybody that doesn't know this one, he is a Shakespearean actor who takes revenge on all of the critics that said how poor his performances were in reenacting the various death scenes from Shakespeare's work with them in their place.
Right, yeah.
And
the same, yeah.
It's so good because it's just in that era of the 70s where there is just the right amount of gore and blood where it looks more realistic than something you'd see in the 60s. And it comes off as realistic sometimes. Like the very first person that dies is just attacked by a mob of homeless junkies, essentially, and he's like grasping at this sort of see-through plastic that you'd see at a construction site, and you just see the blood start smearing as he's grasping at it, and it looks like such an actual struggle, and it's very realistic. I love that sort of that time period of Price.
Yeah, for sure. Because just a few years earlier was Fives, which it's almost the same template because in Theater of Blood, he's getting revenge on the critics and he's doing it in a certain theme. And in Fives, he's getting revenge with the doctors and the associates and whoever, and he's replicating the plagues. And it just goes to show you that he's so good at constructing and creating a character that you absolutely want to hate, but you also understand in some sort of way.
You know, you could probably say that even, and I would probably call this his most famous film because it's the film that everybody recognizes him in. It's the film that plays every year at Halloween on Turner Classic Movies, House of Wax. This is the same role. It's about this man who wanted to create the most lifelike wax sculptures, and his investor just torches his wax I don't know what you would call it, his gallery, and just for the insurance money, and of course he comes out of it horribly disfigured, much like Fives. And he ends up coming up with this grand scheme to get back at the people that wronged him. And it's absolutely wonderful. And that came out in the 50s. Like, each decade he keeps repeating this character, and it's just a good character.
Yeah, and that came out in 3D too, which in the 50s was such a big deal because you had a lot of filmmakers, for example, William Castle, who ended up directing another Vincent Price favorite, The Tingler. He was known for, and there's a term for it, but it's escaping me. He was known for outfitting the theaters with props and live theatrics, like for like House on Haunted Hill, for example. Like a skeleton would come down and people would be in the audience like trying to mess with you. And so for The Tingler, William Castle outfitted the seats with this vibrating electrical device. So every time The Tingler would come on the screen, you would just like get this jolt on your seat. And I really appreciate that. And especially for a role like Price, who ends up breaking the fourth wall, saying like, scream for your lives, the Tingler's on the loose, and then like all the seats shake in the theater, and he says, we now return to the theater. I just love it so much.
It's wonderful. And you mentioned the 3D, and all I can think of is the only 3D that was in House of Wax, I think, was just that one little interlude in the middle where this guy is just using a paddle ball and he's just doing it right at the screen, and that's the only 3D I think that's in the movie, and it's really freaking funny because it's like, oh, it's this 3D experience, it's gonna be so horrifying, and then it's just like,
right, it was just like fuck. Yeah, but I agree. I think that when people think of Price, they think of House of Wax, and I also think they think of House on Haunted Hill, which is another favorite of mine. And in that role, he's not, he's not so much as his other cookie cutter roles, but I find it hysterical, the back and forth that he has between him and his wife.
Oh yeah,
because very clearly they've been in this disastrous marriage from the get-go, and Price is just a sick fuck, and he adores the macabre, but he's also not really a killer in the movie. And then you find out through all these twists and whatever. By the way, like, we're not delving too much into the plots of these movies because we think you deserve to watch them on your own. But throughout all these twists and turns, you find out that Price, like, is just straight up playing a human. He is speaking and acting what most of us have on our minds most of the time, and that's what's so great.
And of course, House on Haunted Hill has the spookiest skeleton in all of cinema.
When the skeleton rises from the acid, it is my favorite fucking example of hokiness.
It's so too spooky. It's too spooky. I think amongst Price's work, besides House of Wax and House on Haunted Hill, I think the Roger Corman films are probably his most well known. And yes, a lot of those are Vincent. Yes, a lot of them are Vincent Price films. A lot of them are Edgar Allan Poe films, which so many of them are really beautifully shot. The set pieces are all really wonderful. Oh yeah, let me get that out too.
Yep, such a great collection.
And I have the Shout Factory collections as well that have some of the other pieces that aren't in that set, but
I only have the second one.
I have the third one as well. I wish I could find that first one, but I can't spend $300.
It is so much money.
I know. And it sucks because it's such a good set.
But
at the same time, a lot of the pieces that are in it are in other sets, such as the 6 Gothic Tales from Arrow, and the original Fly, I think, is on that. But now they've released the Fly set that is the original Fly films and the 80s ones with Goldblum. But some of the best parts about those Corman films are the fact that they're ridiculously funny.
Yes.
On top of being some of them are just straight macabre, a very great take on Poe's work. But then you get something like The Raven, which is straight up a comedy.
Straight up.
With Boris Karloff, with Jack Nicholson's in it.
It is a young Jack Nicholson.
A very young Jack Nicholson who still looks just as intimidating then as he does now.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And of course, our favorite tiny German man.
The Corman films, to me, obviously you can argue it was Corman's schlocky direction. It was the post stories themselves. It was that colorful cast of characters. But the one thing I absolutely adore about the films, and it's a really sad fact, is that Peter Lorre was just shit-faced the entire fucking time.
And you can tell with his performances because he is much more slurred in some of his performances, even though he's still giving it his all, which is kind of hilarious that he's giving it 100% when he's drunk.
I gotta give it to him for that, at least.
And of course, I think our favorite Corman film is the funniest one, being Tales of Terror, or pardon me, Comedy of Terrors.
Oh, Comedy of Terrors, yeah.
There's also Tale of Terrors, which is a fantastic piece.
Although Tale of Terrors is great, because Peter Lorre again is just shit faced, and he's trying to.
And that one gives us another one of the best Price gifts of him doing his wine tasting faces.
Oh my god, the wine tasting competition was fantastic. I'm gonna post various pictures throughout the episode. One really quick though, the Raven. There's this picture of when Peter Lorre transforms back from the Raven to the Wizard, and he's like holding his wand up, and he's just like. And I'm gonna post it here because it is the funniest reaction gift ever.
It's great.
But yeah, the Comedy of Terrors is great.
Comedy of Terrors is essentially if you want to see Price at some of his funniest work, it's a riot. And it's like, it takes all of the best elements of that 60s era comedy, adding in the macabre that is normally shown in Price and often Laurie's work. And then you add like all of these great actors and actresses putting this ridiculous plot together that I still to this day think that someone should adapt Comedy of Terrors into a Broadway musical.
Yes, and we've talked about this because that story would be perfect for the theater.
And for anybody that doesn't know, Comedy of Terrors is about a mortician and funeral parlor owner who is a terrible person. He's a lush. He spends all of his money on booze.
Yep.
He hates his wife, and his wife has a terrible singing voice, and his assistant, played by Peter Lorre, is desperately in love with her, and he is constantly dragged along on what ends up becoming this very funny bit on them murdering people to get the widows or widowers to pay for the funerals so that they can make some money.
Right, to pay rent.
Exactly.
He's like, I'm going to kill people for rent.
And of course, the owner of the property is the great Basil Rathbone.
Yes, I love Basil in this. Yeah.
Which he's so funny in this. But like some of the just goofiest bits are like how they reuse their nice coffin. Like they have one coffin that's like for show and they're just like, oh yes, look, it's beautiful. They can't afford anymore, so they go back to the gravesite after the funeral, dig up the casket, dump the body, and take the casket back.
Oh my god,
it's
so
classic.
It is absolutely classic. And actually, in my house, I have, and I'll post a picture of it too. I have a what I did was I took the behind the scenes picture of all the cast members in the coffins while Vincent Price is reading the Variety column, and Peter Lorre's like holding the candlestick, and I put a frame around it in Photoshop, and I printed it out on a poster, and I put it on my wall.
I love it. It.
because that's just, to me, it's not only a statement on how much I love the film and all the guys in it, but it's just an example of a time where there was such a great respect for theater, and it never tried to take itself seriously. Like it was we knew what it was. It's literally called the Comedy of Terrors. And although it was directed by Jack Turner, which is great because he did movies like Out of the Past and Cat People, and he did like very serious noir and horror movies, and then you get Comedy of Terrors, and it's such like a deviation from form that you can't help but respect it. So I just love everything about this movie.
I still think the one of the best like split seconds of the movie. It's literally like a second long, and it's just Peter Lorre so sad when Price just destroys this coffin that he was building, and you just get the shot of him looking down at it so sad, going, my coffin. and I die every time I hear him say it, because it's just, you could take it out of context and it would be the saddest thing you've ever heard all day.
Yeah, Laurie's always been known for those like subdued lines that are really meant to like invoke this seriousness and depression value inside of someone, but at the same time, they bring like such a comedic value. Like in the Maltese Falcon, when he's talking to Sidney Greenstreet and he's trying to explain how like they could have had the Falcon, and he's like, "You bloated imbecile, you big buffoon." And it's just like, you're supposed to take him seriously, but he's just so funny. You always try to take him seriously, but you always get a good laugh out of his performances. I know like later in his life he tried to take on a lot of roles. He lost a lot of money. Like one of his assistants stole from his production company and all this shit. We won't get too much into it because the life of Peter Lorre is actually really sad. But
Yes.
but I think like when you get all these guys together, there's such a chemistry that to this day I have not been able to see recreated by anybody. I mean, people come close, but Laurie, Price, Karloff, Rathbone, you just don't get a group like that anymore.
And it's a lot of it comes down to the film industry.
Sure.
Hollywood is so different from when it was then, that we don't get those types of personalities in film anymore. You can't look at an actor and have that sort of almost typecast selling point, like with Price, how a lot of advertisements that used him would incorporate that a horror theme, like some sort of like a bathroom cleaner, and he would be holding up the bathroom cleaner, and he'd make like a face,
Yeah.
and it'd be like, scare that mildew away, something like that. But like, you don't get those types of people anymore. They're actors. They have political opinions that you get mad at sometimes, but like, they're there.
Right. Yeah.
And then you have like, then you look back and like Vincent Price was a wonderful actor, a avid art collector who toured with his art around the world.
Yep.
And also a man who loved to cook, made his own cookbook with his wife.
Mm-hmm.
He loved roller coasters. It's like these little things about this person that were much more fun to learn about when it wasn't just plastered all over social media.
Oh, real quick, I'm gonna post the picture of him enjoying the roller coaster in his suit and tie.
Oh my god!
Because
yeah.
he's so wholesome. But you're
it's
right.
so cute.
But you're right. He was much more than a man behind the screen. I mean, he absolutely loved life and everything. And this brings me probably like to the last point of it all. His daughter Victoria Price, who has done a damn fantastic job keeping his legacy alive. And Phil over here is holding up a very nice piece of memorabilia, if you'd like to explain.
A very good friend of mine was at a horror convention in Cleveland, and Victoria Price was there, and she was doing signings for the cookbook that Vincent and his wife made. And Victoria goes around, talks about her dad all the time, and she's a wonderful person.
Yeah, she's a sweetheart.
And my friend thought, there is one person in the world that I know who adores Vincent Price more than anybody. And so she got this lovely little image of Vincent Price looking very charming with a cigarette in one hand and a book in another.
I love it.
And it just says, to me, all our best. And while the picture has Vincent Price's signature on it, Victoria Price signed it below. And it's just a very lovely little thing that I'm very happy to own. It was a wonderful gesture from a very nice friend, and
yeah,
it's just nice to have something that's even as small as that. That's just sort of like memorabilia for somebody that has had such an impact on my life. Not only as like somebody that I appreciate their work. But Price is also one of the reasons why I went into any sort of acting to begin with. I loved he has a larger than life voice, something that you recognize the moment he starts talking. And that's why I strive to be as good of a voice actor as he was just an actor to begin with. And and this is probably more funny than anything. I think Vincent Price was also one of my sexual awakenings, because he's definitely he was definitely one of the reasons when I realized I was bi, because he is a handsome man no matter what age he's in.
No matter what your sexuality is, he's a handsome man.
Exactly. Like,
he is a fucking handsome man.
and like, you look at like him when he was like a lot younger, like in the 40s, and like you see these wonderful roles, and he's clean shaven, which you never see in like a lot of his later pieces. But then the moment he gets that mustache, I'm like, oh, it's perfect.
Oh. And it's funny because speaking on sexuality real quick, a lot of people throughout the years would ask, is Vincent Price gay? Is he bisexual? What's his deal? And so his daughter essentially confirmed, well, you know, he swung a little bit, but he was human. And the whole point of Price and humans in general is you live your life. Like, there should never be an exact grouping of who you are as a person. You're just living life. And especially since he came from a time where it was either don't ask, don't tell, or there was kind of an acceptance in his group that he was in. It doesn't even really matter. But I always found it funny when people are like on Quora or Yahoo Answers, like, does Vincent Price is gay? Like, you know what I mean? So, but yeah, Victoria Price has done a fantastic job keeping his legacy alive. I love her. I adore her. And I think she does a pretty good job sending out newsletters about him, and also she writes books, and she catalogs her diaries, and she talks about like her life and her experiences. But I'm not sure if she's still doing this, but a couple years ago she introduced a legacy video series where she would actually spend about anywhere from like 10 minutes to 30 minutes talking about her father, and she would include behind the scenes photography, never before seen photos, maybe clips of home videos and information on who he was as a person. Again, I'm not sure if she's still doing that. I signed up for like a couple of them. You know, if I still have them downloaded, I'll see if I can upload them somehow. But yeah, I think that what she's doing is great, and there's a whole community around him, and I think that's absolutely wonderful. And there's a whole Facebook page where people gather and talk about him, and there's a couple podcasts out there even just dedicated to the man. Shout out to the Full Price podcast. He does a great job, and would love to collab with him someday, so shout out. But yeah, there is a big community, and it just kind of goes to show you the impact that this man has had on everybody, and that we're not alone in how we feel about him.
And it's nice to if people that don't know him, to introduce him to a new age of people that enjoy movies or just enjoy horror or whatnot. Because, you know, you look back at these really wonderful pieces, and even if they might not be scary by today's standards, they're still like wonderfully shot. The cinematography is wonderful, the set design is wonderful, and of course the actors are wonderful.
Yeah, and it's and there was that certain camaraderie back then that you could just see it in the actors' faces. You knew the experience you were about to be dealt would be very unique, and it doesn't matter if it was supposed to be serious or not. At the end of the day, we all had fun with it, and I'm just very grateful to be able to watch his movies, own them on Blu-ray, stream them, be able to talk to him, be able to have a platform like this to talk about a man that's had such an impact on you and I. So,
and it's wonderful to see more of those movies can be consistently remastered, because some of them I would never want to lose any films that were made by Vincent Price, but sometimes the unfortunate end of things is that some movies were just not well preserved or burned or were just housed in places that ended up making the film reels unusable. So to all the companies that are bringing us these wonderful remasters, Arrow, Twilight Times, while going under now, did several releases of Price's work, which I bought up a couple during their sale, their going out of business sale, and I'm very glad I did.
Mm-hmm.
Shout, any place. If you can find a film by Price, definitely look up a box set, because usually they are fairly cheap and they come with a bunch of films, usually like 6, and you could have a nice little evening just watching a couple.
Yeah, and you don't have to ever intently stare into your screen and try to imbibe what's going on. You just put it on for fun. Like it could be background noise, but the point is, he is an entertainer, and that's what he does, and he does a damn good job at it. So yeah, we highly encourage you look up box sets. A few of his movies should be streaming like on Amazon or something, maybe even Netflix or Shudder, and yeah, so cheers to the man that basically sculpted the way that we interact and the way that we, just think about cinema.
And now all you got to do is put up that picture of him in like a turban on a magic carpet with a bunch of vivacious women. I know that exists. I just don't remember where.
It does exist, and I'll be sure to like Photoshop Egghead right behind it.
Yes. Oh, that's wonderful.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, we just really wanted to gush about Price for a little bit. Again, we're thinking about doing a full-on episode later on. We'll each pick a couple movies, and we'll talk at great length about him and his history and the real impact he's had. But for now, we figured
just a little birthday gift from us to him.
Yeah, happy 109th birthday to Vincent Price, and that's really about it. Yeah. So, this has been the Silver Screen Fiends podcast. Thank you for watching / listening. I've been joined by the professional gentleman, Phil, and we really appreciate you tuning in for this very impromptu episode, and we will be back either later this week or next week. And yeah, that's about it. Any closing thoughts? You want to plug anything, Phil?
I mean, if you're interested in somebody who doesn't make content, you could always follow my YouTube channel. Pro Gent Show on YouTube. I used to make some anime reviews, and I used to record podcast stuff, but I've been slouching on all of that because I've been either depressed, busy, or busily depressed. But trying to get back into it. It's something that I do enjoy doing. And obviously I love talking with you, so it's we could easily do another piece for my little podcast series, Opera Glasses, but who knows. But yeah, I'm at Pro Gent Show on YouTube. You can also find me on Twitter and Facebook. I don't post there either.
A lost cause, I see.
Usually the things I tweet are retweets aimed at Sam of like clips from Chowder or maybe a clip from Courage the Cowardly Dog or something, or Billy and Mandy.
Yeah, Chowder reanimated.
We're waiting on that. It'll be in time for Christmas.
Very excited. Knishmas.
In time for Knishmas.
Yes, Knishmas.
Imagine a Vincent Price character in Marzipan City.
Stop! I would die.
What would his name have been?
What would his name have been? Citizen of Marzipan. Probably.
Oh, Vincent Spice.
Vincent Spice. There you go. I love it.
You can't handle my spices, Mung Dog.
Great. I need that now. Contact CH Greenblatt. We need to get the screen lit.
Let's do it.
So I'll go out on a very brief but important quote from the man himself. A man who limits his interests limits his life. It's something that ever since I heard him say, or rather read him talk about, I have lived by. It is absolutely true. Always be open. Always love and enjoy life. Even if you're down, especially right now with our current situation in the world, very scary times, very uncertain. Just be there. Be there. Love people. Understand what's going on and just hang in there. That's all we can do.
The Backstreet Boys reunion tour will end sometime. We will get through it.
We will get through it. So yeah, this has been the Silver Screen Fiend podcast. I've been Sam. That's been Phil, the Pro Gent, and we will catch you soon.
Love you. Bye.
Hate this show.